Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Welcome to Backstage Pass. My name is Gail Davis, and I am your host. And I am so excited to have my friend Amanda Lindhout with us today. Amanda is the New York Times best-selling author of a book called A House in the Sky. And she is an internationally recognized voice on resilience and mindset. After surviving 460 days as a hostage in Somalia, Amanda has dedicated her life to helping leaders and organizations navigate uncertainty and adversity. She has delivered over 500 keynotes in 28 countries and has an unparalleled voice on resiliency, mindset, and transformation. Welcome, Amanda.
Gail, it's so fun to be here with you today. Thank you so much. What a pleasure. And congratulations on 26 years of GDA.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. I have such fond memories of meeting you and hearing you speak for the very first time in Canada at that women's conference and just walking away forever changed after hearing your story. And I think your mom was on stage with you at that one, which was so powerful. So for those that are listening, let's dive into the story because it is so incredible. As I mentioned in the intro, you were in Somalia. You were a hostage for 460 days, enduring circumstances and situations that most of us can barely imagine. Yet today, you speak about resilience and mindset and transformation. Can you take us back to that chapter in your life and share what helped you to mentally navigate that experience?
So the year was 2008. I was a freelance journalist who worked in conflict zones. So I had lived and worked in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, all over the Middle East and parts of Africa. And so I was on what was supposed to be a 1-week work trip with an Australian photographer, a colleague of mine. We were in Somalia, a small country on the Horn of Africa, a place that has had conflict for almost 40 continuous years. So a real state of anarchy. I was very experienced in conflict zones, but this was something different. On the day that my life changed forever, we were driving along a highway road. We were going to get an interview. And I was sort of lost in my thoughts, and I noticed our vehicle slowing down. And when I look up, Gail, it was like something out of a movie. There's a dozen teenage boys emerging from behind a parked car holding AK-47s. It all happened really fast. Our car was forced to stop. They surrounded us. They got in behind the wheel. And we drove off. At that point, I didn't know yet what was happening. I think I was hoping it was something as simple as being robbed. But they took us to a house that had been prepared for us. So we understood that this had been planned. One of their leaders showed up and he told us that a ransom was going to be demanded for our lives and that we were being held hostage. That was the beginning of what ended up being 460 days, so almost a year and a half in captivity, in increasingly dire conditions. I was initially held with my colleague, and obviously there was a lot of comfort in that. But after a failed escape attempt, we were separated, and I was taken to what I call the dark house. which was literally a pitch black room where my captors put chains on my ankles. I was unable to move my body at all. I mean, I was literally not able to sit up. I couldn't even lie on my back. I could just lie on my one side, chained to the floor for 24 hours a day. I remember at that point feeling like I had lost everything. I mean, even the things that you think can never really be taken away from you. Like, I didn't see the sky for over a year. I don't think I ever smiled once. They even changed my name. And so my entire existence really became reduced down to this small spot on the floor in this dark room, waiting for what would happen next. And I got to know despair very well in that dark room, as you can imagine. And the spirals that despair takes you down, um, despair spirals into grief, spirals into regret, spirals into hate, into revenge, and just on and on and on. And I lived in that dark room with this despair for a really long time. But what I share with audiences is that there was something remarkable and very surprising that happened to me in that dark room, which was that there was not only the despair, I became very aware of something else emerging from within. And that was very connected to my resilience. My resilience, which is part of my human blueprint, which we all have, that had a voice of its own that sounded like I'm one day closer to the end of this, whenever the end is, that sounded like I can do this. I will survive. And because I had nothing but time in there, I became so curious about this part of myself. And I began really directing my attention and my focus on that part of myself that was still saying yes to life, this hopeful part of myself. And the incredible thing was, the more that I did that again and again and again, it became this powerful resource that got stronger over time. I liken it to going to the gym. Like, at first you can't lift much, but you keep doing it and eventually you can do more. It was very much the same, that it was difficult to do every time, to orient myself in that direction of hope. But the more that I made that choice, it became a very valuable resource to me. And one of the really important learnings for me in that context was, I couldn't wait for the despair part of the story to be over to begin to change my experience of what was happening. That in the very same moment, I could choose, and that's the important piece here, choose to place my intention on the part of myself that was hopeful. And what strengthened that feeling of hope and optimism was feeling grateful for my life, even looking, if you can imagine, in the environment immediately around me for things to be grateful for, remembering my purpose, like my why my life mattered, all the things that I hope to go on to do with my life if I were given another shot at it, became a really important anchor for me. And really, essentially, I trained my brain, and the fancy word for that is I trained the neuroplasticity of my brain to look for the good. And I began over time to be able to see more of it. And the despair that was always there, it never went away. But up alongside it grew my resilience.
It's interesting to me that you say that for 1 year you did not see the sky. And the name of your best-selling book is A House in the Sky. So can you talk about where the title came from?
Yeah. So I just spoke about my sense of purpose, remembering that, right? My why. And for me, that was, in a way, this mental image, the big picture of my life, that in that dark room chained to the floor, that it just existed out here, about as far away from me as it possibly could. That was this mental place where I was building something else for myself, a future version of myself, and staying connected to that. That was my house in the sky.
Well, it's incredible. I I have always been struck, and I've been in your audience a number of times. I've read and loved the book, and I've always been struck by the role of forgiveness in your story, especially towards those young boys and what they were doing to you. Can you talk a little bit about forgiveness and how you landed on the importance of that?
Yeah. And it's a journey, that the forgiveness aspect. I think it's important to say that, that it's something that I have to keep revisiting even all these years later. And so a couple of things. One, even in the moment, like I'm in that dark room, it was it was very important for my logical brain to try to comprehend, how can human beings reach these kind of depths to do these kind of things to another human. I'm sure many of us wonder that when we turn on the news, right? And we see the headlines. And those boys were teachers to me of this universal truth, which is that hurt people hurt people. They had grown up in this war-torn environment. They were very shaped by their experiences. They were very unhealthy people. And so in captivity, that that understanding helped me get through the difficult moments, because some of the most difficult moments were like, how can humans be such monsters? Okay, hurt people hurt people. That's how they're able to behave like this. That is different than forgiveness, but it's a starting point. It's a very logical, separate from emotion, of that is a how.
Is it more compassion?
There's a piece within that of compassion too, certainly. If I can take my own woundedness out of the story and look at a bigger picture of many, many wounded people, say in a war-torn country like that, then that can evoke a feeling even of compassion for the state of the world, the state that creates environments like this. And as someone who's always aspired to be compassionate, that was important to me. And then I was released. And it's about 6 years after my release, I received a very unexpected phone call from one of the police officers who had worked with my family throughout the kidnapping experience. And he told me that one of the leaders of my kidnapping had been arrested in Canada, and that there would be a trial and I would be expected to testify at this trial. And whatever anger I had already worked through at that point, and whatever point on the forgiveness spectrum I had found myself at that point, while all of the old anger came back, I was now going to face this guy in an Ottawa courtroom. And I did that. I met that moment. I testified. He was found guilty. He's in a Canadian prison now. But all of those old emotions that many of which I thought I had filed away, were back in full force. And I was really confronted with the intensity of that. And I was very fortunate to be supported through that trial by a man who's a psychologist, and he's a Blackfoot elder. And he shared something so simple and powerful with me, a teaching from his people, where they take the word forgive and they very simply reverse it, give for. And he asked me, Amanda, what would you give for your freedom? Like, was I willing to give my attachment to my anger for my freedom, because the truth is that my anger didn't have the power to touch even the hem of that guy's shirt, but it had the power to destroy this woman right here, right? And so I revisit that question again and again and again as life brings up old emotions, as there's a headline about a kidnapping somewhere in the world, and I can feel those old emotions of anger because that happened to me. I then have the choice. Am I willing to give my anger for my freedom? And the answer for me again and again is a resounding yes. And so about forgiveness, it's not necessarily something that I bestow upon those boys because it's something they deserve. It's something that I do for myself because I deserve it, because I deserve to be free.
Oh my goodness. I had never heard the reverse of forgive, give for. That is really powerful. If I remember correctly, after the trial, you took a break from speaking and now you're back. And if it's not too personal, I'm just super curious how that break and that perspective and completing the trial has changed what you present now that you're back talking with audiences.
Yeah, that felt really important to me. I felt like I needed to really um, bring the kind of care to myself that I needed in that moment so that I could continue, if I were to continue in this speaking journey that I've always loved, to be really authentic for my audiences. I had, as I said, all these emotions to face and to process. I did a lot of work on myself in those years. And what I came out of those years away with was what I now call this framework, these four quadrants of resilience. Like what were the things that helped me not just in captivity, because those 460 days they were intense. They were moment by moment. But in the years afterwards, including that trial period, it required also a whole other set of mental resources and tools
Yes.
to get through that I think are so valuable to share with people. And and that is what I share now. And those four quadrants are gratitude, connection, presence, and purpose. And
Wow.
I love the opportunity to share with audiences who are navigating adversity, who are navigating change, who are just have had a bad year with loss and they want to win again. It is a framework that conditions your mind to not just bounce back, but to really transform the difficult thing into something better, into something that is useful for you in your life.
I think you've answered a question I was going to ask you, which is if anyone has read your book, it's a heavy story. I mean, it is dark, it is heavy. And I think when event planners are moved by a story like yours, as they're presenting the idea, there may be people that go, "Ooh, that sounds really heavy." And it feels to me like you've taken the experience and now you have the framework and you have the perspective. But any comment that you would like to share if someone is a little worried that, it's going to be too heavy?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for the opportunity to answer that because that is so valid. Well, first of all, the way that I share it on stage, I mean, I think it's important to take people into the dark house because in order for me to have the credibility and the expertise on getting through difficult days, it's good for people to know what I've been through.
Yes.
But I take people from the dark house and say, metaphorically, we've all been in our version of a dark place where we don't know what's around the next corner. We don't know what's ahead. And so I'm able, I feel, to transition out of the personal story of darkness and immediately make it surprisingly relatable to
Mhm.
people. Um, the fact that I've been able to completely rebuild my life in the aftermath of everything that I've been through. I am a very happy, healthy, thriving woman in my life. And people are very curious about how I have come to be where I'm at today. And I believe that what I share on stage is so inspiring and uplifting for people, whatever they're navigating. Most people are navigating something personally that's difficult, but many people are navigating something professionally that's difficult. And the good thing is that these four quadrants are useful in both the personal and professional spaces. It's a training and a conditioning of the mindset that's very intentionally done, that helps you get through the difficult moments, but then also begin to rebuild afterwards, because you've conditioned your mind to believe in possibility, to stay connected to your bigger purpose for your life. That is such an important piece that we can't lose sight of, and we often do in the middle of the dark days. That that big picture, that's your purpose. That is such an important anchor.
It feels like there's two key components to your presentation. One is your story, which is fascinating and people are intrigued by that and want to hear it. But then there's the takeaway value where you go into these four quadrants, and that is relatable to everyone in the audience.
Yeah, and it's so important. I don't think it's enough to just have a really incredible story. That I wouldn't have come back on the stage if I didn't have something that I feel really passionate about sharing with audiences, that I feel that's really going to help them in their journeys. And the feedback that I get again and again, and why I'm hired by the same groups again and again, is that there's something that's really immediately applicable for the audiences.
For those planners that are listening, uh, what types of organizations or what types of events do you see yourself speaking at? I mentioned at the top of the show that I saw you at a large women's conference. That's obvious, but clearly, based on your calendar, you're doing a lot of different events. So, can you share some of the types of events that seem to be a really good fit with you and your message?
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to be as busy as I am, and it's not industry specific. It's more, what is the challenge that the audience is facing? And so many organizations and industries are in such a time of change and navigating uncertainty, global tension. And so for organizations that are wanting their leaders or their teams to have some tools of a framework for cultivating a mindset that's going to be able to carry them through the difficult days. And the other side, uh, this is such a powerful story to do that. Organizations that want to turn losses into wins. I've had that, also the privilege of speaking for some professional sports teams. These are tools that people are going to leave the room feeling energized and excited about rebuilding. That shift in perspective, that is life changing for people. The personal story helps bring that, and then the takeaways are the solid pieces people get to take home. They leave with a change in perspective and tools that they're going to be able to use.
I know earlier you used the word metaphorically, and it's so true because, I mean, with 100% certainty, there's never been anyone in your audience who has been held hostage in Somalia for 460 days. But people really relate to it. And I'm thinking of someone that I know right now who's going through a dark period, both personally and professionally. And if there's someone that's listening right now, Amanda, and they're navigating a difficult period, whether it's personally, professionally, or both, what do you think some of the things they could start doing today to begin building this resiliency?
Well, first, I want to acknowledge that it's hard. It can feel so hard in the moment because often our energy is really low. And so it's just important to understand it requires something of you, right? It's going to be a little bit of work to take those first steps. And so again, like going to the gym, you have to first of all choose that you want to make things better, right? That's a choice. And then aligned with that choice are going to be certain consistent actions and practices that you have to be willing to take, even though it's going to be difficult in the beginning. And we can talk about some of those practices in a minute, but I just want to again say in the beginning, it feels difficult to do, but the little piece that keeps you going is those choices begin to reinvigorate you and give you back your life force. And you begin with some difficulty at first making these choices, having daily practices. You very quickly be able to get the gains from it. And that's what keeps you on track. And that's what keeps you going. So one of the things that I talk about is, one of the quadrants of a resilient mindset is gratitude. And we hear this again and again and again. And we hear it so much because it's true that when you look for what is working well, and you stay focused on that, it begins to gain momentum. So even if you have many things in your life that feel like they're falling apart, I promise you there are things also that are going well. There always is, as long as there's breath in your lungs and your heart is beating. Even that itself is something to be grateful for. For me, in that dark room, I could hear the birds outside. I could hear the birds singing. Okay, I'm grateful for that. So there's always something. So developing a practice where every single day you're looking around you and reminding yourself that all is not lost. It's really important anchor. Staying connected to your purpose. You've heard me say this again and again, and it's difficult to do, especially when you're in one of those downward slumps, and that's the most important time to stay focused on that big picture for your life. And so it can be a little bit difficult to do that, but important. So writing down, verbalizing what your goals are personally, professionally, what do you want to do with your life? If these particular areas of your life feel like they're falling apart, what are the other areas that you have control over and can build up? Another one of the quadrants is connection, as in human connection. It is something that unfortunately we are really starting to lose grasp of in our world today. We're scared of each other. That the headlines are really grim often when we turn on the news, and yet we are wired for human connection, and so we are more resilient and able to get through the difficult days when we can tap into connection. So that even if that's just like one other person that helps lift you up, you have to take that first step to initiate that contact and plug into that connection, because that fuels our life force. And the last of the four quadrants that you can really put into action is finding ways to connect to your own presence. And this can be done in many ways, but I think we often overthink it. We think like we have to go to India for 3 months and learn how to meditate. It doesn't have to be that difficult. I just see it like a light switch that I can turn on internally. Literally, I visualize a light switch. When I find myself overwhelmed, feeling like I don't know the next best thing to do, with one big full deep breath and turning on this light switch inside of myself, I can bring myself back into this present moment. And often the answer that we're looking for is, as the expression goes, like right under our nose, but we can't see it when our attention is divided, when we're focused on what isn't working well. Bringing yourself to the here and now and finding ways to do that can bring the clarity that you need. And so when you use these four quadrants in various ways throughout the day, it's not some big time consuming thing. And in fact, once you're on the path of doing it, it's fun, it feels good. Then your environment, your life around you begins to transform in ways that can feel so surprising and in relatively short time.
I love this. I'm going to keep this in my back pocket and send it to people because everybody goes, has a moment where they go through a period and it's hard to see the future. And this is just such a good reminder of those basic tools, and you deliver it in such an eloquent way. So thank you so much, Amanda. And if there is anyone that's listening that would like to inspire your audiences and help them with these tools for resiliency and working on their mindset and transforming adversity, please reach out to us. We would love to work with you to bring Amanda in to speak to your group. Amanda, thank you so much. And it was just absolutely wonderful to reconnect.
Oh, it's so good to chat with you, Gail.
Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.